So if oh wow, it told me it was being recorded. That was crazy. Okay. So here we go. All right, so a little bit about who I am. I graduated from Michigan State in December of 2019 with a degree in environmental studies and sustainability. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do Americorps after I graduated, because I like the social sustainability that is incorporated within it. And I started my VISTA service on January 21st. And like Alyssa said, my service ends pretty soon here on January 19th. And my site is with the Center for Community Engaged Learning at Michigan State University. And I work mainly on the Beyond the Classroom team. So we have academic community engaged learning, in which students who are in courses can get credit for doing service, as well as Beyond the Classroom, which is everything from just general volunteering to days of service to teach, what's it called? America Counts, America Reads, and other programs that aren't necessarily affiliated with curriculum. So our office went remote around March 15th, which was really soon within my service, and all of our programming continues to be virtual. And I kind of spearheaded all of the virtual volunteering from the Beyond the Classroom side of things. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how to prep for creating virtual volunteering programming. So when thinking about virtual volunteering, which I'm just going to refer to as VV in a lot of these slides, just so you know. Oh no, sorry. Think about who your volunteer audience is, what your organization does, what your in-person volunteering looks like, who your community partners are, what virtual training or orientation may look like, as well as how you can incentivize opportunities. In terms of thinking about who your volunteer audience is, I work with a university, so my audience of volunteers are mainly college-age students. They're really busy, but they're interested in making a difference and getting involved and want a variety of things to get involved in because they all differ so much in terms of interests, backgrounds, all of that. So that's one thing. Think about the audience of your volunteers and how you can fit virtual volunteering opportunities to match what your audience wants. And then think about what your organization does. So with the Center for Community Engaged Learning, we match students with local community partners, host volunteer events, train and orient students to community engaged learning, and a lot more. So definitely think about what your organization does. And if you're more of a volunteer matching organization like we are, then you'll think differently and work with community partners in ways than someone who directly coordinates volunteers for an organization will have to do. And then think about what in-person opportunities look like. That can really help to create virtual positions. So this isn't feasible for everyone because some organizations rely so heavily on in-person, and that's fine. In those scenarios, you have to think a little bit more outside of the box, and that's where a lot of capacity building really comes into play. And then think about who your community partners are. What are they currently doing? If you're not someone like a university and we're working directly with community partners and you are at an organization where you're recruiting all the volunteers, think about what some of your like sister organizations or just other organizations in your community are doing right now that can help you think about what you may need to do. Can you work with them in a way to increase volunteers together, that sort of thing. And then think about how you'll need to train or orient volunteers. Is that your domain? Is that your community partners? What works best for your audience? We specifically haven't required training on our end for a lot of opportunities, but our partners will do it. We do have a virtual orientation, and that lives on our university's like curriculum website. It's called D2L. And that's where classes post materials. So that's where our orientation lives. But think about that, how you would turn your trainings or orientations into virtual mediums. Would it be like a presentation and it's self-guided? Would it be video? Would it be a Zoom training? And then think about where that can live and how you'd want to adapt that for your organization. And then lastly, how can you incentivize opportunities? This is a little bit more of an optional thing, but, and a lot of people will volunteer just out of the goodness of their hearts. It's something they want to do. They're part of the community. To me, that's essential, being part of a community. But working with college age students, I think sometimes students need an incentive, because they're just so busy with classes. They may have jobs they need to do, research, and this may not be the first thing on their mind. So when you want students to engage in service, I definitely think of incentivizing them. Maybe you have a running thank you list of volunteers on your website. You have volunteer awards. We do volunteer awards at the university. You send virtual certificates. I did this for one of our programs. It was super fun and everyone was really excited about it. Maybe a raffle if you're able to, if you have the funds to do that. Or even something like a training, like if they get involved with one of your programs, maybe you have a resume workshop, or you have a webinar, a Q&A with service-based careers. For one of the programs I did, I got the Peace Corps recruiters at Michigan State to come and talk to our students for just like a little webinar. And make it personal, because the opportunities aren't in person anymore, and that's what makes them personal. So make the incentives personal, because I think that's really important. So now I'm going to talk just a little bit about what virtual volunteering looked like in the beginning and then what it looks like currently. So in the beginning, we really didn't expect it to last long. I don't think anyone did. We were just trying to keep students engaged, trying to promote meaningful opportunities. And we didn't have really any local community partners involved in the beginning. So what I did is I just created a list where students could find a variety of virtual opportunities. And this list was kind of broken down based on interests, skill levels, and then how much experience they may had. And this list was, it just had a lot of national, very Googleable virtual opportunities. So the UN has virtual volunteer opportunities, the Red Cross does, Smithsonian, National Archives. And this was a good place to start, because it just kind of got our students involved and just trying it out. But these are all really national ones. There wasn't really anything local. Some websites like Catch a Fire had locally based volunteer programs, but that also was like a volunteer match system. So it was kind of like we were matching the students with the volunteer match system. It didn't really feel like it was doing anything, and students definitely like feeling engaged and like they're actually doing something instead of busy work. I feel like these opportunities, they were really good in the beginning for a few weeks, and then students just kind of felt like they had exhausted it. And also it was really hard, and this is a thing that you need to do with your Americorps service, is record the data. It was really hard just having a list on our website to know who was doing what and how much time they were putting into it, if they liked it at all. So after we had this list, we put it into one of our volunteer softwares that we use for the academic courses that I had mentioned earlier. And then we could have students directly sign up. We could check their emails. I could reach out to them, send them little surveys about their experiences. And that was better, but still we could only use that for the summer, because the system, like I said, was used for academics. So we need to make sure that once fall hit that we weren't in there, so that it wouldn't get confusing for the students who are actually enrolled in courses. But at least it allowed us to capture data for some time, and we could put more local community partners into that as they started to come into their own. But yeah, but like I said, those opportunities were, students just kind of fell out of love with them, and we really wanted to help out the community in East Lansing, or encourage students to help their communities at home. So we started to think about how we could involve more community partners. And so we adapted. We started making our in-person volunteer opportunities virtual. We created new programming. I created a ton of new programming, and I think that's one of the best things you can do, because this time is so different than anything else, that you can really do whatever if you have the okay to do it. And if it works, it's great. And if it doesn't really matter. You can adjust and move forward. And so definitely be creative. I created this program in the summer called the Virtual Summer of Service, and it was 8 weeks long. We had 400 students sign up for it, and some of them engaged in over 25 different service projects, but we made it really flexible. Students could do as much or as little as they wanted. And I think that's also really important with virtual opportunities, is to make it flexible. We also encourage students to get engaged in their home communities, and we reached out to community partners to make projects more local. So this is probably the most difficult part, is getting community partners on board with virtual volunteering. If you are a link in the volunteer chain like my organization is, this part is pretty hard, because you don't want to force your community partners to do anything they can't handle. This time that we're in is already super overwhelming for a lot of partners, and you just don't want to put pressure on anyone or make it so that it's more work on their end. But it was important to us to get community partners involved, because that's what our volunteers wanted, and that's what we know was most impactful. So it's a little bit of a balance, and if you aren't in a volunteer matching organization, then this might not be that important to reach out to community partners. But it's still important to understand, and may help you if you're working with other organizations just in general. So I definitely recommend contacting your existing partners, asking if they have any virtual opportunities. And a lot of times with the organizations we reached out to, they didn't even know where to begin. If they don't have any, then ask what they might need. A lot of times you can just suggest stuff. That worked out really well for us. And a lot of times it would be capacity building services. So creating videos, social media content, updating websites. And our students really enjoyed those projects. And if your partners are mainly in person, you can try to work through how to transition a in-person position to be virtual. I went to this webinar and we did this activity, and you listed out what the position may be. So one that's pretty important in person is someone answering phones or checking people in. And we tried to work out how we would go about making the position virtual. For something like that, it's probably pretty important that it's in person, but just working through something with your community partners like that can help to get the conversation going, and maybe they'll think about something that they hadn't thought of before. And then if you're still having trouble, find new partners. You can always go back to your existing partners once things are in person, and finding new partners is always a great way to just make your impact bigger, as well as get new contacts and expand your organization out into the community. And so that's what we did with a lot of our virtual volunteering opportunities. We wanted to find new organizations. So now thinking of what opportunities can be virtual. And that's kind of anything, unless it is really specified in person. But some of the events we made virtual were days of service, all of our days of service, from the April 2020 Global Day of Service, which was like a month after we decided to go all virtual. We planned that like that. All of our days of services have been virtual this year. Thinking of something new and different, like the virtual Summer of Service Challenge, where you're getting your volunteers engaged in a challenge. There might be like a reward. This is the program that I talked about that had certificates. One-time promotional events. Marlena and I are working with some individuals at MSU and U of M to try and get like a March Madness social event where we're going to talk about a global day of service and things like that. So just one-time things where you just get people together, maybe do a small service project, and you just are trying to engage them, because I feel like, especially if you're at a university, you still want to like establish that there's a community there. And then events based around certain national holidays. If there's like National Plant a Tree Day, maybe you encourage your volunteers to do that, or just something. I did like a little give thanks project around Thanksgiving, just to keep people engaged is really what it is. And also, you know, diversify what programming you already have and test out what could potentially work in the future. And then here's like my little guide to how to make your event virtual. So first thing to do is to reach out to community partners. When we did our first day of service virtual, the global one, we didn't really work with any community partners because it was so last minute, and that wasn't at a time when people had necessarily been thinking about transforming their in-person opportunities into virtual opportunities. So we kind of just made all of those projects up on the fly. But if reach out to your community partners, see what they have to offer. If you have a low response, which we did for our October day of service, suggest some virtual project ideas. Pretty much everything we suggested, our community partners took and ran with, and it was great. And we had a really successful event. So you can suggest things like fundraising, if they need help fundraising or creating a fundraising campaign, videos, if they want to promote what their organization does, maybe creating new training videos, guides, recordings, translations. We had a lot of bilingual students do translation work, and that was super cool. Web help, anything you can think of, anything your partners say they have a need for, just take your creative power and try to turn it into something, a project that your volunteers can get engaged in. Always have some projects in the back of your pocket in case you can't find any community partners. So for our April Day, we used a lot of those national organizations, the Smithsonian, the National Archives, and we just directed our students to do something for that day. But you can always create your own, like writing thank you letters for the Give Thanks service project that I was talking about around Thanksgiving. I had students write thank you letters to faculty and staff members, MSU student veterans, things like that. You could have them get engaged in citizen science. There are lots of apps and websites where they can do research on their own. Calling legislators, advocating for things that are important to students. These are all ways to engage civically and make a difference in the community. So always have those in the back of your pocket. And those are nice too if people just one-off email you and say, hey, I'm looking for something to do. And if there's nothing set in stone, you can direct them to do that in the meantime. And then once your projects are set, you can set up the event online. So this is another thing I want to show you all. It's called the Social Change Wheel, and it was made by Campus Compact of Iowa and Minnesota. And I think this is a really nice tool to use when thinking about transforming things into virtual opportunities, because we're always right here with volunteering and direct service for the most part. But you can encourage your volunteers to get involved in different ways. So maybe that is advocating and raising awareness about an issue they're really passionate about. And that's nice for us with the university, is because our students can like get involved and do that in a variety of ways. But if you are at the organization where you're the main volunteer coordinator, have your volunteers advocate for what your organization is doing. Bring it up to legislators why it's important and why it's necessary. Fundraising, philanthropy, that's another big one that can be done virtually, whether that's setting up GoFundMe pages or the different types of virtual. I know there's been like coordinated 5Ks, but they're remote, things like that. So this is a good tool to look at to kind of transform what opportunities you currently have into different ways of making social change. And then another thing is the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. This is how we found our new community partners that we reached out to. We all took, there were about 3 of us, and we all took about 6 of these or 7 of these, and then we looked for organizations that aligned with these goals. And so this is another way, and there is on the UN website, there is a guide called the Lazy Person's Guide to Changing the World or something like that. And it just gives daily behaviors that people can do. So you can start people off with this as well if they are interested in this type of work. And then more getting back into the process of turning your event virtual. Then you want to set up your registration or sign up process. I really like to use Qualtrics. MSU has the ability to use Qualtrics, but if you don't have Qualtrics, you can use Google Forms, Sign Up Genius, whatever else that you have in your wheelhouse. It's probably already what you've been doing for the most part. And then you can set up where the project will live. So I found that Google Shared Drive works really well for this. You can customize the theme, include PDFs with instructions, Q&A form, folders for different projects to be uploaded, spreadsheets, etc. It's really nice to collaborate, and you can use any type of online collaboration program. I just personally like Google Drive, and all of the MSU students have the capability to use Google Drive. So that works really well for us. And then you'll use the email that they registered with, and that just lets you automatically get them into the Google Drive, and they can start working. And then because you already have that information from the registration with the email, you can send them reminders. And also this allows that for flexibility. So for our October day of service, we did this, it worked really well. And although the day of service was October 10th, they had the whole week to go in to the Google Drive, work on their projects. And so it just made it a lot easier because everyone's schedules were so up in the air with online classes. So here I'm just showing you screen clips from my Google Drive of what we did. This one was for the October 10th day of service. We had 6 or 7 different drives, and students, whatever project they signed up for, they were then added to that correct drive. I made these little pictures, I guess, just to customize it, make it a little more personal. And then this was the Thanksgiving one, and this one hasn't happened yet, but it's like a mental health awareness one. Since there are no in-person therapy dogs, we are doing like pics with your pooch, it's called. So this one is just in the developing stages, but that's how you can kind of customize it. Then within it, you can have different folders with like project submissions. If you wanted to have different categories, you can also do that. Here is just a little screen grab of our instructions sheet. So they have their projects they're working on, the instructions, and then lower down in the document, there's how to name it, how to upload it, what you can include within it, stuff like that. Then here's a little screen grab from the question and answers document. This was super helpful so you don't get a bunch of emails. You can kind of manage all questions in here. And then if October 10th was a Saturday, if you have people continue to work on it, you can then like let them know they can email you. But this was super nice because they can just type it in whenever, and then you can just get back to them pretty quickly, and everybody can see it. So if it's a frequently asked question, other students or volunteers will be able to see it, and that's really nice. And then for some of the projects we had for the October 10th day of service, we wanted the students to specify what they were doing so we didn't have too many overlaps. So one of the projects was reading children's books, recording a reading of children's books that we were going to send to elementary schools. And we wanted to make sure everybody didn't read like green eggs and ham or something. So we just had them write it in a little spreadsheet with their initials, so that we would know, you know, we don't have 500 books of the same topic. And then once the event is over, I always send a reflection survey. This is really good for data management and writing the reports, because you can ask how they liked it, what they want changed, how many hours that they did. And it just helps make your reports a little bit more accurate as well as detailed. And you can like, I always like to ask, you know, what their favorite thing was, or like a positive moment. And I try to include those sometimes in the section of the report that asks about like happy stories. So thank your volunteers a lot. That's really important. You want them to feel like they are a part of the community and that their work is valued, and it definitely is. So here was just a little Instagram post I made for the students who participated in the challenge, and I included this image in the email that I sent to get them to do the reflection survey. And another thing is with reflection surveys, not everyone is going to do them, but you can also incentivize it in a way as well. Like I made sure that they did it because they had to type out their preferred name. So I knew what to put on their certificates. So that's just a little something too, is like how to get them to do something that a lot of people would normally skip. And then if you're specifically using the Google Docs system, go through the projects. We had students write letters to high school seniors. So I just wanted to like make sure nothing inappropriate was said or there wasn't any bad advice that was given. So I just like looked through them all. It was fine. I organized them and then sent them to the community partners. And then you can analyze your data. This is honestly, I love doing this. One of the ways we incentivize people to get involved in a bunch of things on campus is we have this thing called this Spartan Experience Record. So if students get involved in like on-campus research or community engaged learning, like our days of service, the event will be added to their Spartan Experience Record. And so in the reflection surveys, I always have them like check off what the learning outcomes that are like the 20 learning outcomes in the Spartan Experience Record thing that they think they learned. And so then when I'm adding them into the system, I can like check those off for them. And that's really cool to see too, like if you do have like learning outcomes or something like that, because then you could say like, oh, that wasn't something I necessarily thought this project would do. One of them's like respond empathetically. So, oh, I never thought they'd do that with that project. So you can kind of look at that data as well and not just the numbers. And then my last little bit is with recruiting and managing volunteers. So with recruiting virtual volunteers, I always reach out to the volunteers I'd normally contact. And a lot of these were students that participated in the last in-person event that I got to witness before the pandemic occurred. So I reached out to like site leaders, asked them to invite a friend, get a group going. With our Google Drive, it's really easy to collaborate with other people. And so your volunteers can kind of form a group and work on a project together. I think that kind of helps to maintain that sort of in-person vibe that you would have normally gotten. Use your site's contacts. Ask your colleagues like who they would recommend you reach out to. If you're at university, I know a lot of people in my cohort are at like Saginaw Valley or CMU or U of M or Michigan State. Send it to advisor listservs, student organizations. With our Pictures with Your Pooch event, we're gonna reach out to like mental health organizations, student organizations that are involved with animals. So you can like really target it and try to get the people you think will like it the most. Certain colleges, with our October Day of Service, we reached out to the College of Education because a lot of it had to do with providing learning materials for elementary school kids. And then faculty members, a lot of times. I will say it's easier for me because I went to MSU. But don't be afraid to reach out to faculty members or anyone, even if you're like, you have no connection to the place at all. The more the better. I know sometimes it can be annoying to get 35 emails, especially when I was a student. I was asked to join like the rugby team. I was like, I have no interest in this. But if you just send it out, the students or volunteers who you're sending out to who want to do it will probably do it. And then design flyers, social media posts, anything to get it out there. And use the incentive to your advantage. I always put, hey, you can get this added to your Spartan experience record. And students are like, what is that? Because it's kind of a new thing and not a lot of people know about it. But it incentivizes them to do it. And here are just a couple social media posts I've designed. They're pretty basic, but they're eye-catching for the Virtual Summer of Service Challenge. This was great to increase our social media interaction because we had bonus projects that were only available on Instagram. So you had to like our page on Instagram, which then now those 50 people who were new followers will see all of our content later in the year. And if students don't have social media, because I understand they don't, or like a lot of volunteers, but then I would say if you don't have it, you can just email me. But this was great to increase our interactions. I remember our social media manager was like, we got 80 people to follow us this week. And I was like, great, that's what I wanted. But just make them eye-catching. Don't include like a ton of information. This one's kind of more wordy than I normally would have done. And then link them back to your website or whatever it may be. And then here is a little picture of the certificate I made for the students. This one just has my name on it, but I put everybody's name on that. So it was pretty easy to make. I just made it in Canva. Yeah, and I think it made the program a lot more special and personal for those students. And they did a lot of hard work, and I had everyone in the office send me their digital signatures. So it seemed pretty like cool and rewarding. And then with managing virtual volunteers, I honestly find this pretty easy virtually. I use my registration information to my advantage. I get all of their emails and I make sure I like email and follow up with them. I try to be really organized on my side, especially with the Google shared drives. And once the project ends, you can, in Google Drives, you can set if people are content managers, editors, viewers. Once the project's over, you can just put everyone as a viewer. You can hide that drive, delete it, whatever. But as long as you take what was in it and then move it to a place where your community partners can access, it just makes it so easy. I love doing the events in Google, but whatever you may have access to, make sure you're organized on your end. Also be quick to respond, especially if you're working with college-age students or professionals. They probably have a ton of emails that they're getting right now from everyone. So try to be quicker to respond. I think it makes a big difference. And then thank your volunteers profusely. Like I try to do it all the time because it really matters. And then create those reflection surveys. You can do it in Google Forms. I don't know, Survey Monkey, is that one? I think that's one. Qualtrics, whatever. And try to make them short and as many multiple choice, or like Net Promoter Score is one where you can get, it's like on a 10-point scale, you can get good data analysis with that. But don't have them write a ton of stuff or they won't finish your survey. Here's something I did during the Virtual Summer of Service Challenge to really thank the volunteers and show them that they were making an impact. So I had them, they had to reflect on each week of their challenge in order to like be counted for the end certificates. And so I asked them if they had any pictures to send them to me. So we would post on Instagram some of like the pictures we got that week. And I think that was super cool. It made it more personal and then showcased exactly what our students were doing and what service they were doing that week, because it varied. Okay, now if anyone has any questions, I'd love to answer them. I hope that was informative and I hope I didn't speak too fast because I know that I do that when I'm presenting.
No, that was great. And so I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. Or should I keep it on, Sophie, or what do you think? Should I keep it recording?
If anyone has questions, I think it should leave it on.
Leave it on. Okay, cool. So I'll keep the recording on, and I can always chop it up. If you guys are like, no, don't put that in there, let me know. I could chop it up too later. But yeah, thank you so much, Sophie. That was awesome. I was taking notes, and I have some questions. So I'm going to let you guys go first. I'll open the floor here. You can go ahead and unmute yourself, or you can type in the chat box. Sophie, what question I do have, and I love the idea of thanking volunteers. I feel like there's so many ways you can do that. So what are some of the ways that you've done that? Like, and you could do an email, right? Like that. Oh, thanks everybody. You know, a blanket email. How would you make it maybe more personalized? But what are some tactics you used?
Yeah, definitely. I definitely always send thank you emails, especially after big events, with the reflection link, a reflection survey embedded within it, because I don't want to just like put it out there like you have to do this reflection survey, or like this reflection survey benefits me and my report. So I always try to thank them that way. I'll usually, like I had the little Instagram post, we try to do that social media or on our website and showcase some of the projects, or send out like infographics and show the impact they made. We use the public sector's index on volunteer, what's it called? Like value. And so then we'll show students like how much money they helped organizations save by doing it. But also in terms of thank yous, like I think the certificates are really cute and personalized. We had an event where if students volunteered a certain amount of hours, they could be entered to win an Echo Dot, like an Amazon Alexa type thing. So having things like that where they can kind of benefit too from it in a way. We don't want to make that the emphasis of it though, but I think it is a nice little thank you. Like if you've done a lot of work, you're entered to win this thing. So I'd say that. I'd say emails. In person, it's probably a little bit nicer because you can kind of like give things out or show your thanks in person, but just trying to do that. Like I said, creating little opportunities that are available to the people that signed up, or like giving them recordings and things like that. So yeah, you can kind of do however you want.
Yeah, and I like the way you combine them all too, because you do want data and you do want to be able to follow up with people who showed up, who've ever showed up, and just combine everything. And it seems like you collect a lot of data too, so I'm glad you touched on that, that it is difficult and challenging to record and maintain data. Even phone numbers and addresses, like maintaining accurate stuff for people, it's a lot of work. But the more you do it, and I bet you're having this experience too, the more frequently you keep things up and manage it, the easier it is to, you know, do it next time and maintain everything.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, there are some questions in the chat that I see. So one from Mary or Mari, I'm sorry if I am saying your name wrong, said, did you frequently have volunteers interact with forms you made with Qualtrics, and was it simple to transfer data from Qualtrics to Google Forms or other forms? And you're welcome. Thanks for coming to the presentation. Yeah, I'd say that they would frequently interact with Qualtrics. You won't always get 100% response rate. The one time I had 100% response rate was at an in-person event, and I had the site leaders use a QR code, and when the students got on the bus, they had to scan it and do it on the bus ride home, and that I got a huge response rate on. But yeah, usually the Qualtrics rate is pretty good. And in terms of transferring data, Qualtrics data, you can just download as an Excel. So I'm pretty sure Google Forms works the same way, where you can download it or you can analyze it in Google Forms. But I take anything where there's multiple, I'm getting data from multiple places, and I just put it in Excel or put it in a Google Sheets. So I don't ever like put anything from Qualtrics into like a Google form. But yeah, I'd say it's pretty easy to do. Qualtrics takes a little bit of getting used to if you haven't used it before. And I think Google Forms is a nice place to start if you haven't used Qualtrics. And then there's another question. Do you have any suggestions for recruiting people virtually and safely in a community that's not that technologically advanced? That's a great question. And thank you. So I'm presenting next week as well on virtual volunteering safety, and maybe I can talk a little bit more about this. In a community that's not that technologically advanced, I think that's a really important question, especially because everything is so technology heavy right now, and not everybody has access to like good Wi-Fi or like has a computer or things like that. So in terms of that, I'd say you might want to promote like remote service opportunities. If your volunteers have access to email, you can kind of give them ideas of what they can do remotely. So this worked really well in the summer. Nobody necessarily needed their computer or they needed like good Wi-Fi access because we had them doing things in the community. Like they could just find a park that they wanted to go to, pick up trash. You know, we suggested everyone wear masks and gloves like in that certain circumstance. And we had things where like you could like help a neighbor out and stuff like that, so that it isn't so you have to be like on the computer 24/7. And so in terms of what I was suggesting with Google Drive, with some of those projects, you could try to make them into more of like remote, where they could do it with without a computer, and then they could potentially like bring it to you somehow, or you could collect it from them so that they wouldn't need to have it be a computer. So
maybe like an email report or something.
Yeah, so an example of that would be like if you had people writing letters to veterans, you could have them write the letters in person and then either drop them off, or you could have like a collection place somewhere in the community, like a collection box, and then you could get it there and it wouldn't be so technology dependent, but it's still remote and everyone's safe in that way. But I'll try to include that in next week's presentation. So thank you. I'm going to copy it.
That was a good segue. I didn't even set that up. That was not set up. Looking ahead, Yashra. I like it. I have a question about, I think sometimes when we, especially if like we're kind of new to something, it's kind of scary to try out new things. So I like when you said, oh, you know, just try it. We have to be creative. We have to be innovative, especially in a time where we don't know what's going on all the time. So we have to try it. Do you have any suggestions on, gosh, like a way to kind of overcome the scariness of trying new things, or like maybe building in a system into the overall thing? Any tips on that?
Yeah, I guess I'd just say plan it out first. So the virtual summer of service challenge, at one point, I think my office and we were just talking about we needed students to do something, and a bunch of us threw out a ton of different things. And then I kind of took the idea that I had and ran with it, and I just planned it all out on a Google Doc. I think that can help make it less scary because you already have the steps of what you want to do, and then it makes it easier to present to your supervisor or whoever it is, because I know as a VISTA sometimes you may feel like you don't have the say to like create something new necessarily, or you don't want to like step on anyone's toes, and so having that plan and what steps you want to do and what you'll have to do to execute it is really helpful. And then it makes planning it super easy because you already have the idea of what you want to do, and now you just have to implement it. I'd say if you have a good relationship with your supervisor, talk it over with them and maybe have them bring it up to whoever is in charge of those types of things. And always just be like super creative. I don't think you can really go wrong virtually right now with coming up with events. If you want to start somewhere small, look up like I said, like the national holidays, like National Donut Day. I don't know what you could do with that, but I'm sure you could do something. And if you have community partners that you regularly work with, reach out to them and see if they have anything, and maybe you can plan an event with them, and it might feel like less intimidating that way as well. Always like with a partner is good, I'd say, so that you're not so alone and you feel like it's all on you.
Yeah, good advice. Anybody else? So I feel like my last question is, what is something that you wish someone that you wish you knew more about when you were starting as a Vista? Kind of knowing what you know now, you've been through a year, you're going on to the next everything, you know, it's all coming to a close here and on to the next big thing. What is something you wish you knew then in the beginning?
That's a good question. Probably that, I don't know, because I know everyone's sites are different, and I know that everyone's like VADs are different. But just that, like, you'll have the opportunity to work on a bunch of different projects. I think that's something that will kind of translate across all Vista positions, is that you won't always be working on like one thing. And so if you don't like it, don't worry, it's going to change. And also that, like I mentioned before, I think maybe as a Vista, you might not feel as able to make something your own, and that you definitely do. You do have that power, and you are completely capable and able to like create a program, manage it on your own, like do all the steps for it. So if you want to just ask about it. There's nothing wrong with asking. The worst answer you can get is no. And yeah, and you can always like pivot, and there's so much you can do in a year, and just like make it your own and know that you are capable of doing what you want to do, and like making a program yours.
That is fabulous advice, I just must say.
Thank you, Taisha.
After completing a year myself, I think that is like really great advice to give to the newest vistas, because sometimes when you're going in, you feel like, oh my God, it's just little me here. How can I make a difference? But you definitely can. So I think that's very good advice. Thank you, Sophie.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thanks everybody, and thanks to those that asked questions. You can always email me. I'll put my email in the chat.
Yeah, and we'll talk offline about it too. I'm going to end the recording.